I know the fez is a bit of a cliche for a present home, but I'm sure someone will like it if I can keep it looked after for whatever happens next. Does the body rule the mind, or does the mind rule the body? I don't know, but I am still ill. I think that I need to move on, so we're leaving Konya and Turkey and we're heading southeast to Aleppo in our quest to find Abdel and return these rings. I spent my first night in Konya sleeping in the back of Sylvia. I pulled up on the tarmac apron, signed in with the guy, pretended I was getting something from the back, and didn't come out until the next morning. I ate some of the rations that my newly acquired Greek doctor friend Alexander had given me back in Rhodes, and I settled down. It was strange being inside Sylvia with the engine off, no spinning propeller. Get used to the sound when you're flying. It doesn't seem noisy or intrusive, you hardly register it. But when it stops, you really notice the silence, like you've turned off the extractor fan in the bathroom, or more poetically, like when you've walked off a busy street in Rome into a cool, quiet church. It was warm, 20 degrees through the night, so it would have been perfectly comfortable if I hadn't been generating so much heat myself. I go from freezing to boiling. I drank water from my flask and then immediately sweated it out. My nightmares were back, including a repeat of the one about the failed murder at JFK Airport. I must have been awake most of the night and fallen asleep just before dawn. I woke, bursting for the loo, with Sylvia uncomfortably hot. It was 10:45. Planes must have been landing right beside me for hours, but they hadn't woken me up. Anyway, we are going now. Brakes off, throttle up. There we go. Throttle down. Revolutions down. And we're on to another leg, Sylvia. So after I'd woken up, I found a toilet, cleaned my teeth in the terminal building, and I swallowed the last 2 of my paracetamol, set off with Alexander's Turkish phrase book to find Rumi's tomb, and some more paracetamol. Paracetamol doesn't cure anything, of course. They simply buy the body a bit of time to do its work. A century ago, without them, alone in a strange country with a fever like I've had, I might just have kept getting hotter and hotter until delirium set in and either fever or the illness killed me. Paracetamol is entirely a product of modern chemistry. dating back to late 19th century when the first fever-reducing drugs were developed. After some trial and error, some misinterpretation, and some early, very serious side effects, paracetamol became the world's most widely used painkiller. I don't think anyone really knows how it works. The best theory is that it interferes with chemical messages to it, telling the brain that the body is in pain and that it ought to keep running at 40 degrees. It doesn't kill the infection, but it persuades the thermostat to stop overreacting. Favourite joke at school was, why are there no painkillers at the zoo? Because the paracetamol. Paracetamol. Those were the days. Harder to pun with aspirin or ibuprofen. There's an enormous graveyard at the centre of Konya. A road running round it. It's down there somewhere. It's where I walked to find Rumi's tomb. I pass a cafe with green awning and festoon bulbs suspended back and forth from the cafe to poles tied fast to a line of bollards. They mark the outer limits of a long, thin car park. I pass seats with burgundy cushions set out on the dusty street. On from the cafe is a stonemason's selling gravestones and memorial items. Passing the stonemasons, I see a minaret emerging from between some trees, and then a dome, and then another minaret. Besides the stonemasons, a small store fronted by battered refrigerators. I select a Coke. Probably never do that at home, but here in Konya, approaching Rumi's tomb, I instinctively search for something reliable from a culture that I know. The shopkeeper types a number into a big button calculator, holds it up for me to read. I proffer him a palm full of change and he takes his pick. It seemed somehow like an act of translation, that financial taxation, but of course in Britain we started discarding Roman in favour of Arabic numerals in the 15th century. The printing press accelerated this transition, which annoyed the Italians, who had long held a commercial advantage through their early adoption of what is a massively superior, if graphically less pleasing, number system. Cemetery Wall comes to an end, to be replaced by substantial bicycle racks. Beyond these, a wide road complete with twin tram tracks. Beyond this road, protected by square decorative bollards, is a grand mosque. I think it's a mosque, not the tomb. Anxious to perform a full reconnaissance, I walk past this first elevation of the building. The rails and bollards sweep around the corner. The street is busy with people. There's a row of bus stops with prospective passengers milling around, waiting. Sky is blue, but it's not overly warm. People are in their coats. The mosque and the square in front are beautiful, newly renovated perhaps. There's a substantial square beyond the mosque, some stone benches and decorative flower beds with corkscrew trees. Behind the mosque is nestled what looks like a second mosque, with a lower dome and a single minaret. This must be the site of Rumi's tomb. I asked, "What should I do?" He said, "That is the question." I said, "Is this all you can say?" He said, "Seeker, always keep asking." What should I do? As it was, everything turned out to be far less intimidating than I'd feared. Rumi's tomb is now part of a wider museum, one of Turkey's most popular. You just pay and go in. So I did. I'd spent the night sweating in an aeroplane. I deserved a treat. And it was cheap, and it was a treat. The whole thing was breathtaking, actually. I loved the harmonious architecture, the intricate patterns on walls and ceilings, the amazing calligraphy. Yeah, it was a treat. There is something useful about being in a country in which you don't recognise any of the script. Something useful, something restful, something calmer. That bit of your brain that in a city is relentlessly trying to decode text is at peace. Advertisements, notices, packaging, signs and slogans, all silenced. Encoded language disappears to become decoration. The reading voice in your head is silenced. No noise. I was still ill and sweating, but Rumi's tomb was refreshingly serene. Mostly I hung back and viewed from afar. Then when the crowds dispersed, I stepped closer in. With each new influx of visitors, I stepped back and then in, breathing in the rhythm of the day. While I was there, my symptoms receded. I lost track of time. Eventually a guard came over. You like Rumi? Yeah, I do. You see Seema? Not yet. You see Seema. He nodded and I nodded. Seema is the ritual dance of the Mevlevi order, the spinning of the whirling dervishes. Growing up, I learnt that some people fought like dervishes in a frenzied way, so then when I heard of the whirling dervishes, my mental reference was Taz, the Looney Tunes Tasmanian devil who, when provoked, turns into a tornado of destruction. This made sense. After all, the word dervish is, I suppose, pretty close to devilish. So with this mental image, it was a shock, finally, to see the Seema. The dancers exuded a hypnotic serenity as they gently turned. Long white skirts pulled conical by the steady centrifugal force. They circle and turn, hands raised, one palm up, one palm down, impassive, listening as the music plays. There's no comparison to Taz, either in their whirling or their philosophy. Turns out I was getting two kinds of dervish confused. In Northeast Africa, earlier in the 20th century, the dervish movement was fighting for an independent Sufi state in what was at the time British Somaliland. It was a complicated situation. It often is. The dervishes attacked the Ethiopians and the British. In response, the British armed local tribes to attack the dervishes. When the large dervish force became depleted, they resorted to guerrilla tactics, which in contemporary Somali would be recognised as an insurgency. At some point within this, around the time of the First World War, the Ottomans and Germans started to bolster the dervishes' ability to attack the British. It was all pretty ugly. A long way from the transcendental spinning dervishes of Konya. The Tasmanian devil is the world's largest carnivorous marsupial, which is a niche title, but one not to be sniffed at. What's a marsupial? Well, as a rule, if it's a mammal that can stuff its babies in a pouch, that is a marsupial. Humans are not marsupials. The pouch has to be part of your anatomy to count. Tasmanian devils are only found in Tasmania. They've got large heads and big necks which allow a very strong bite. They can swim and climb trees, and they have what is politely described as a pungent smell. I'm unsure if they can be domesticated. It's probably not a cue to try. They'd probably come under the Dangerous Devils Act. Taz only appeared in 5 short cartoons in the 60s, but returned in the 90s with his own show, neatly titled Tasmania. He was originally voiced by Mel Blanc, which is no surprise, as Mel Blanc, the man of 1,000 voices, was the voice of anyone and everyone who was anyone in the world of Looney Tunes, Hanna-Barbera, and so on. It's claimed that whilst in a coma after a car crash, Mel Blanc spent a fortnight being entirely unresponsive, until a neurologist asked, "How are you today, Bugs Bunny?" To which Blanc, in the voice of Bugs, weakly replied, "Just fine, Doc. How are you?" Coincidentally, the person who first introduced me to the Sufi branch of Islam was a friend called Taz. I'd known him for years before I discovered his actual name was Tazwa, and so T-A-S, not T-A-Z, which was a disappointment. Obviously Z is a much more exciting letter to have in your name than an S. He didn't seem bothered. My friend Jacqueline, she abbreviates her name to J-A-K-I. I can respect that. No need for a C. No need for a double K. Even if I wanted to, I'm not sure it'd be possible to do much with Reggie. To jazz it up. There you go, jazz. Double Z. Not sure Taz would work with a double Z. That would have been a bit ostentatious. Trying a bit too hard. Like a man wearing a personality tie. Why personality ties are referred to as personality ties is a subject of dispute. Those who buy and wear them are often bought by people with little personality. They clearly think that they have personality, and they're wearing their personality tie in order to demonstrate their personality. Those who don't buy or wear them believe it's the tie that has the personality, rather than the person wearing the tie. By donning the tie, the wearer is able to masquerade as someone with personality, in the same way a toupee bequeaths hair on someone partially bald. In other words, personality tie is a personality supplement. Sartorial Viagra. Down there, just flying over, is farming country. Though I don't see many animals, but it is supposed to be good for dairy. If it wasn't for the mountains in the distance, it'd be a bit like East Anglia. You can see crop marks and strange features in the fields. You could pretend to be an aerial archaeologist. Outlines of ancient buildings, roads, field systems, lost villages, people who've moved on, disappeared, places lost to history. The whirling ceremony is called Sima, which translates as listening. The dancing is a tuning into God, I suppose. Repetition is a classic method for altering consciousness. Haitian drumming through the night summons the gods from Africa in real time. Rave culture, American minimalist music. The list goes on. It all induces a kind of ecstasis. Rumi said the objective is to raise faith from imitation to realization. I understand this. You follow others in a thing so long that eventually, or maybe even suddenly, it becomes yours. Ritual is what you do to make things real. There was a point during the secularization of Turkey in which Ataturk passed a law banning any practice of Sufism, including Sufi dress. This law, number 677, is still in place. Presumably this is why Rumi's tomb is classed as a museum rather than a religious site. In a similar sleight of hand, the dervishes can still whirl, so long as this is a performance, presumably for tourists, rather than a rite. As a child, I was very concerned that when actors played scenes in which they got married, that they might actually end up married for real. I reasoned that to prevent this, the script would have to omit some of the crucial phrases. Thinking about it now, this concern shows a charming belief in the power of words, as if they're a spell and don't require context to seal their meaning. When Izzy and I got married, we gathered as many people as possible to witness our vows, to imbue the words with as much power as possible. There's only 2 of them. I do. We chose a version of the rite that gives those witnesses a further role, that affirms their commitment to helping us keep our commitment. We will. The vicar attempted a TV version of the ceremony by accidentally turning over 2 pages of the service sheet at once, but Izzy spotted the error, put him back on track. So we ended up fully and legally married. We still are. I did. I do. I will. No matter what. The spinning in the dance is a form of dhikr, I think that's how you say it, reminder or remembrance of God. One approach is to repeat the names of God in order to internalize these qualities. Fatima, daughter of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, had a distinctive dhikr that is widely used. You say in Arabic, glorified is God 33 times, then praise being to God 33 times, then God is greater than everything 34 times, which brings you up to 100. I think that's the Sunni way of doing it. The Shia, I think, reverse the first and the third of these phrases. Obviously keeping track of how many repetitions you've done at every given point is challenging and impinges on your capacity to concentrate on the actual prayers. Teachers would now call this cognitive load. So this is where prayer beads come in handy. They help you count without counting. You can get misbah prayer beads with 100 beads for the dhikr, 99 beads for the names of God, and I've also seen them with 200, but have yet to establish what those extra ones are for. The Catholic rosary works on the same principle but has fewer beads and I think is more complicated. The Mevlevi perform their dhikr silently, so as not to be too ostentatious. I praised you in the day, but never knew it. I slept with you at night, but never knew it. I believed I was myself, but I was you, and never knew it. Dervish translates from Turkish as tramp, and Rumi means Roman. Konya had been part of the Roman Empire until shortly before Rumi arrived. He wasn't at all Roman, he was from what's now northern Afghanistan, so I don't know how he got that name. They must have been trolling him. Of course, he was in good company. El Greco just means the Greek, never did him any harm, or at least as far as I'm aware. Rumi moved to Konya when he was 19. It was an important city then, even more so than now. Rumi didn't originate everything he's credited with. He was heavily influenced by Shams Tabrizi, another Sufi poet. Their relationship followed a basic rom-com format. There was the Meet Cute, which has a couple of versions on the same theme. Essentially, Rumi is reading a sophisticated book. This raggedy old guy shambles up and says, "What you doing?" So Rumi replies in a moment of arrogance, something like, "Something you will never understand." At which point, either A, the book catches fire but doesn't burn, or B, is thrown into a nearby body of water, maybe a river, but doesn't get wet. Indignant, Rumi cries, "What are you doing?" To which Shams retorts, "Something you will never understand." It's pretty much Luke Skywalker meets Obi-Wan Kenobi there. After that, of course, they start bumping into each other and hanging out together, and before long they fall in love. I'm not going to call it a bromance, because neither Rumi nor Shams were bros, though clearly in our rom-com Shams could easily have been. Close up a book catching fire in Rumi's hands but not burning. Rumi, medium shot, "Yo, Shams, what you up to, bro?" Cut to Shams, "Nothing, ain't ever understanding, Rumi, you sucker." Technically there's a double negative in there, but delivered correctly, it's a negative plus a negative, hence more of a negative, rather than a negative multiplied by a negative, which is of course positive. I know that my spirit belongs to the spirit of all spirits. I know I belong to the city of those who have no place but to find my way there. I need to let go of my knowing. The area is now called Turkey, is far older than the republic we've been flying over. The land around Konya has been settled for nearly 9,000 years, from the Neolithic period to the mighty Hittites, then Greeks, Romans and Byzantines. They all left their mark. The Turkish people arrived from the steppes of Central Asia after the Battle of Manzikert in 1071. Making Konya the capital of the Seljuk Sultanate. From there the Ottoman Empire emerged, spreading out, ruling much of southeastern Europe, West Asia, North Africa. Lasted for around 600 years, ruling Egypt, Greece, Athens, Albania, Bulgaria, Serbia, Romania, Syria, Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon, Palestine, Israel, Armenia, Georgia. The empire collapsed after the First World War, and the modern Republic of Turkey was born in 1923 with Ataturk as its father. Like Birmingham, Turkey has a young population. About 40% of people in Birmingham are aged under 25, and nearly half of all people in Turkey are aged under 30. Young Turks is a term used to describe radical young people agitating for political change. It comes from a term European journalists coined early in the 20th century, when referring to a group of activists who were struggling for Turkish independence. The Young Turks were a group of reform-minded Ottoman officers and liberals, intellectuals who seized power in 1908, hoping to modernise the crumbling Ottoman Empire by restoring constitutional government and introducing political reform. Although they began as idealists, their movement became increasingly authoritarian, and they were responsible for some of its darkest chapters. The Angry Young Men were a group of politically active British playwrights in the 1950s. The term is said to have been coined by a press officer at the Royal Court Theatre when promoting John Osborne's play Look Back in Anger. Apparently that play grew gasps of astonishment when the curtain rose to reveal an ironing board on stage. Apparently it wasn't difficult to make audiences gasp in London in the 1950s. If it had been turning on a revolve and connected to a smoke machine so that it looked like it was a steam iron, then I might have been impressed. All the Young Dudes was written for Mott the Hoople by David Bowie, at a time in the early 70s when he was so prolific he had to find other artists to record his material. Mott the Hoople stole their name from the title of a satirical novel by Willard Manus. In his novel, a hoople is a square, as in an unfashionable or conventional person. Mott is the novel's main character, though he's not a hoople. The word dude comes from the late 19th century America, used to describe a foppish city slicker, overly concerned with appearance. A dandy, I suppose. You could visit a dude ranch, a place for townies from the east to go and experience a bit of the rough and tough life of a cowboy in the west. I got my hair cut. I had a shave in Konya. Thought it might make me feel better, human and well again. I waited until the paracetamol had stopped me sweating, out of fairness to the barber. I've only been to a Turkish barber once before. Weirdly, on the Isle of Wight. Actually, I think he was Greek. Back home, I usually go to Mary. I've been going to her for, must be the last 15 or 20 years. We took Luke there too to have his hair cut. Probably when he was about 6. Her salon, well, shop, barber shop, I suppose, is the correct terminology. Anyway, it's next to where the kids went to primary school. She saw Luke grow up from primary to secondary school, then having his hair cut when he was home from university in the holidays. Whenever I go, we always say, "Where have those years gone?" When I look in the mirror, I can see the years on my face and on my neck. I think Sarah had her hair cut there a couple of times too, but then she definitely wanted the salon experience, so she went to somewhere significantly more expensive. Mary knows what's going on in the area, and we know lots of the same people, so having a haircut is like a big catch-up. She's always interested in what the kids are doing, even though she's only met Sarah that couple of times. I haven't been back to her since we lost them. I couldn't have that conversation. How's the family? Barbering, in the lands of what is now Turkey, dates back to the medieval period. But like lots of things, including coffee and tulips, it really took off during the Ottoman Empire. Barbers were highly respected tradesmen, and you could get a lot more than just a haircut. There were the usual services like beard trimming and shaving, a bit of ear husbandry, and, like in medieval England, barbers would also offer some medical services like pulling teeth, lancing boils and abscesses, dressing wounds, setting broken bones, bloodletting, and, in exceptional circumstances, maybe even the occasional amputation. Mary doesn't do those things, at least not when I've been in there. Maybe she does after hours. The red and white barber's pole is said to symbolise this dual role, the red representing blood, the white bandages, and the pole itself the staff a patient gripped during bloodletting. That might be a shaggy hair story. They don't have the pole in Turkey. At least I didn't spot one. The Berber I went to had a polished brass basin hanging outside the shop, which was squeezed between a tea house and a man selling mobile phone covers. If I hadn't noticed the chairs reflected in the mirror, I might have walked past. Welcomed me in. I used my phrase book, but it was pretty obvious why I was there, and I used the international language of pointing to gesture to my hair and my stubble. We just flew over Lake Mika, which is formed by the flooding of an extinct volcano. Used to be full of shimmering turquoise water apparently, but drought and extraction for irrigation have turned it into white crusted salt pan. And all the thousands of birds that were down there have all moved on. When I sat down in the barber's chair, tea appeared, which was nice. I found it difficult to know when to drink, whether I'd interrupt his rhythm. He cut my hair first, more trimming than cutting, as though he could see the shape my hair had been before weeks of neglect and cockpit headphones. Then he moved on to the shave. As he wrapped the white cloth around my neck, I realised I hadn't allowed another human being this close for months. There's a slightly terrifying intimacy to a traditional shave as you surrender your throat to a stranger holding an open, cutthroat razor. The first hot towel carried the smell of clean cotton. It settled over my face, and for a few seconds the world disappeared. When it came away, the razor began its quiet work. His movements were economical, no elaborate hand flourishes, no showing off. We tried a conversation. I mentioned Birmingham. He nodded, but I suspected he had absolutely no idea what I was talking about. I told him that I'd flown in, but he probably just thought I was a passenger on a commercial airplane. We didn't talk family or local politics or where or if I was going on holiday. When the shave finished, he produced a small bottle of lemon cologne. It really stung, and maybe to take my mind off it, he gave me an unexpectedly vigorous massage of my shoulders. For the first time in weeks, I looked more like myself again, for good or ill. Last time, and the only time when I went to that Turkish barber on the Isle of Wight, he did a thing where he burnt the hair in my ears. This barber didn't do that, which made me think maybe it's more of an affectation, a bit of barber grandstanding, to make the experience seem authentic when you're a long way from the place of its origin. "Ne kadar, dear?" I asked him. He said something I didn't understand in response, so he wrote the amount on a piece of paper, and I paid him with some of the notes that Alexander had so kindly given me. As I thanked him, "Teşekkür ederim," something like that, he touched his hand lightly against his heart. I like that gesture. Even though there's no words, no contact, it feels, well, heartfelt, I suppose. Bloodletting, which barbers used to do, is linked to the theory of the four humours, which it was believed governed the human body. They're talked about in this amazing book I read a bit of. It's The Anatomy of Melancholy, written in the 17th century by Robert Burton. I read the beginning of it when I was doing jewellery service a few years ago. Only the beginning though, as it's about 1,400 pages. Jewellery service was only 2 weeks, and I did actually have to do a bit of jewellerying. It had been recommended to me by a client I was working for in Belgrade. He said it was the greatest book ever written. Embarrassingly, I'd never heard of it. When Izzy asked me what I wanted for my birthday later that year, it was the only thing I could think of. I nearly spat my cake out when I unwrapped it and saw the size of it. He was right though, it is amazing. Well, at least the first 200 pages that I read are. Burton talks about the humours and how it was thought that they needed to be in balance for good health. He focuses on melancholy, of course, concerned with the causes and cures, hence the title of the book. But healthy mind, healthy body. Maybe that's what's wrong with me. The humours theory goes back to ancient Egypt, but was developed by Hippocrates, who said, "The human body contains blood, phlegm, yellow bile and black bile. These are the things that make up its constitution and cause its pains and health." Blood is associated with a cheerful, optimistic, sanguine temperament and is the most beneficial of the humours. Not sure I got much of that. Phlegm phlegmatic. If you got that, you're calm and reliable, but also prone to being sluggish or indifferent. That could be me. Yellow bile is associated with a choleric nature, ambitious, aggressive, short-tempered. Black bile is associated with a melancholic nature and depression. Cancer was also linked to it. It was thought to be the most detrimental of the humours. Clues in the name, I suppose. Black bile. Doesn't sound like you want too much of it swimming around you. I mean, these mountains are high. You were thought to get ill as a result of having an excess or deficiency of one or more of the humours. They could be brought back into balance by giving herbs or minerals, or by bloodletting, or by making people vomit. If someone had a fever, a flushed face, or signs interpreted as having too much blood, bloodletting was prescribed to restore balance. Blood could be removed by opening a vein with a small blade or lancet, of the medical magazine fame, by using leeches, or by making lots of small incisions. It remained mainstream medicine for nearly 2,000 years. George Washington was bled repeatedly by his doctors in 1799 when he had a severe throat infection. Many historians believe that his doctors took so much blood that the treatment probably hastened his death. It's still done to treat some conditions, but not to balance the humours. I suppose it's a bit like astrology. Humours, like the astrological signs, are linked to the elements and the seasons. I suppose we look for something to explain our personality or our temperament or our health in the cosmos out there, or in the microcosmos inside. Maybe it gives us a sense of having some control or some insight. I'd never broken into song at Mary's. There's only 3 chairs for customers, so never enough customers to form a barbershop quartet. Though I suppose if people are waiting, they could be encouraged to join in. It's probably quite difficult to sing and have your hair cut at the same time. The barbershop quartet supposedly comes from the USA, end of the 19th century, when barbershops were popular meeting places, where men gathered to not only get a haircut, but to hang out, chat, smoke, and that inevitably led to a spot of 4-part close harmony singing. No need for instruments, which have taken up a lot of room in a small shop. The singing is a cappella, in the style of the chapel. The Dapper Dans are the in-house barbershop quartet for the various Disneylands around the world. I presume there are different Dans in different countries. Dapper Dan is also a hair product, favoured by George Clooney's character in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? The film is loosely based on Homer's Odyssey. Clooney plays Ulysses Everett McGill, a modern Odysseus trying to find his way home to his estranged wife. Along the journey, he encounters a one-eyed conman, Cyclops, 3 seductive women by a river, the Sirens, and a blind prophet who foretells his fate, Tiresias. All while his wife Penny, like Penelope, has attracted a new suitor. The film also includes some a cappella singing. For 6 long years I've been in trouble. No pleasure here on earth I've found, for in this world I'm bound to ramble. I've no friends to help me now. Below, Those are the Bolkar Mountains. Not much human life down there. They're like a giant wall separating the plains from the sea. Beautiful, but terrifying. Majestic, formidable, sublime, as the philosophers might say. A mixture of beauty and fear. Kind of emotions you don't get from a meadow or a gently meandering river. These, they're awesome. It's a landscape that's indifferent to me and my life. The highest peak is more than 3,500 meters, so I need to be careful. Pretty lonely up here. If Sylvia's engine stopped, where would I put her down? None of it looks very forgiving. If I crashed, even if I survived the impact, it might be days before anyone found me, if ever. No one would be looking for me. No one's expecting me. I'm just a weird guy in the old aeroplane. My last postcard to Izzy was from Athens. She doesn't know where I am now, or where I'm going, when or if I'm ever coming home. So after all that mountain drama, looking down there now, the land looks much more peaceful. But it's not. On the surface, all is calm, but deeper, deep below the rock, there is slowly boiling magma. It's difficult to imagine from here, but within the rocks, a tension is building. We're flying over the East Anatolian fault line, where two tectonic plates meet. The Anatolian plate is moving west, as the Arabian plate is pushing north, which means the region is prone to earthquakes. There were significant events in 1789 and 1795, then in 1866, 1872, 74 and 75, then later in 1893 and 1904, again in 1971 and 1998, before in this century, 2003, 2010, 2020, and most recently, 2023. In 2023, over 50,000 people were killed and 100,000 injured in Turkey alone. A third of a million apartments were destroyed as tower blocks collapsed. Flying in out of Konya, I was surprised at the high proportion of tower blocks that there are. Sector after sector, all tower blocks. Across the border and the fault line into Syria, the casualty numbers were lower. Due to the political situation, estimates are unreliable, but about 10,000 seems possible. The fault is shared, but it's nobody's fault. It's geo rather than political. The quake was an act of God. Maybe insurers have a stronger faith than most, even though they don't make themselves known at church. Insurance is a form of betting, and betting against God sounds like a bet you're likely to lose. He plays his cards very close to his chest as God. Down there, to the right, if we can see it, is Tarsus. Yeah, there it is. And in the distance, you can just see the Mediterranean Sea. Tarsus is the birthplace of St. Paul. In Roman times, it's rivaled Alexandria and Athens as a centre of learning, attracting philosophers and scholars from all across the empire. Cleopatra is even said to have sailed up the Cydnus River to meet Mark Antony there in 41 BC. She entered the city aboard a lavishly decorated barge. She was probably warmer and more comfortable than the Queen and Prince Philip were on their royal barge, the 2012 Olympics, when a number of people had to be treated for hypothermia in that balmy August weather. Our fire would have been insured. The sun, the concave mirror and the curtains were an accident, not an act of God. I should have taken out secondary insurance, or maybe Lizzie should. I'd like to insure against my husband being an idiot and dropping the ball, forgetting something crucial like renewing the house insurance. You're not supposed to let annual contracts roll over, though, in case firms punish you for your loyalty by increasing your prices higher than those that new customers get. You're supposed to renegotiate every year. Maybe higher rates are just the premium you pay for convenience and security, or the penalty that you pay for laziness. The trick is not to fall into the middle ground, neither rolling over nor renegotiating. Insurance doesn't bring back the irreplaceable, but I suppose the money would help you start again. Risks difficult for humans to assess. Los Angeles is due a mighty earthquake at any moment, but what aspiring actor choosing between Hollywood, Bollywood or Nollywood is factoring the risk of earthquake into their equations? Maybe everyone in Los Angeles assumes that the threat of an earthquake has been engineered out of their modern, prosperous city. Presumably, building codes are now such that everything will shake with the quake, but never fall over. You see extraordinary footage from Japan of things sliding around in shops and apartments, but the building stays upright. You can write as many codes as you want, but unless the constructors stick to them, then they're of no use. Yeah, the people of Venezuela can explain this to us in very graphic detail. As a structure, there are two ways to survive an earthquake. You can remain rigid and decouple from the ground beneath you so that when the shock comes you skate above it detached. Or you can concentrate on being flexible, absorbing the shock and dissipating its energy internally. You're not expected to remain undamaged. That's not really the point. The point is to protect lives, to retain your structural integrity. So long as you don't collapse, you've done well. And that's all that can be expected of you. I think I'm designed in a rigid manner. I think that me up here in Sylvia is me skating above the earthquake of our loss. Izzy, she's built for flexibility. She's at home, damaged but not collapsed. Remembering the Stoics, maybe I should be grateful that I've ever had so much to collapse on top of me. If I slept each night in a tent, then what fear could the earthquake hold for me? If I never had those two beautiful people in my life, how much poorer my life would have been. An American friend of mine runs preparedness training courses. She always tells me, Reggie, when you spend a night anywhere new, check out the evacuation routes so you know where you're going if you need to get out. Don't just check the nearest, check the alternative option too. She says she knows of too many cases in which people haven't heeded the warning signs, even when an alarm is going off. They wonder if it's a test or a fault, whether it really means get out. She says people tend to herd in a time of uncertainty, looking for a leader like sheep. She says, Reggie, in those situations, be that leader. Lead by example. If the alarm goes, get out immediately. Don't wait or question. Get out, stay out until you know things are safe. Encourage others to come with you, but don't wait for them. Get yourself out. Hers is another stoic tactic. Imagine the worst, so that if it happens, you are not caught and entirely unprepared. I follow her advice. In Los Angeles hotel we stayed in off Sepulveda Boulevard, I read the safety instructions fixed by the door. Along with the fire exit routes and instructions, it said, in the case of an earthquake, if you're in bed, put a pillow over your head. Putting a pillow over your head is quite a tempting way to respond to all emergencies. It is possible to retrofit solutions for buildings to survive earthquakes. You need a customised solution for each building. You should prioritise key infrastructure, including power stations and substations. I've flown into many places to try and patch things up after a natural disaster. There's no time when power is more urgently needed than in a time of disaster. The seismograph is designed to give us warning of shakes that will destroy us by telling us of shakes so small we can't feel them. They work because of inertia. The resistance to getting out in an emergency. A mass is suspended in a frame. The frame wobbles when it's shaken, but the mass does not. That's the basics of it. You can make your own, not at all sensitive seismograph using a shoebox, some elastic bands and a marker pen, plus a strip of paper. You'd also need a pair of scissors or a knife to cut 2 holes in the bottom of the box to pass the strip of paper through. You need to pull the paper through the cardboard box under the pen as the box is shaking, with the pen suspended between the corners of the boxes by the 4 elastic bands. Luke and I did this as a primary school science project once. Well, more me than him, to be honest. Sarah did the same when she reached that age. We upgraded the design from Luke's model, as I recall. Maybe looser rubber bands or something. Being an engineer, I always put a bit of extra pressure on school projects. In one, Sarah had to do something connected with a rainforest, so we made a complicated rainforest diorama, and I taught her how to wire up a simple switch so that the diorama had internal battery-powered lighting. I remember my dad used to help me when he had the time. We stayed up nearly all night once, making a model of a cross-section of Hadrian's Wall. It was so big, I only just managed to get it on the bus. It's a good job I hadn't heard of Hadrian's Gate back in Antalya then. There are stories dating back to ancient Greece of animals heading for safety before earthquakes strike. In 2004, elephants and buffalo are reported to have run for high ground, anticipating the tsunami that killed nearly 250,000 people. Flamingos are said to have fled. Dogs refuse to step outside. Survivors include those who can run, following cows, goats and cats inland. And you sometimes see horses running down roads, fleeing forest fires. Scientists logging the movements of animals back these anecdotal stories up with evidence. Animals sense the danger days, hours or minutes before earthquakes, outperforming seismographs. No one knows how this happens, or whether we might be able to encourage the animals to give us more clear-cut warnings. The look of their electricity pylons. Yeah, they're in good shape, those. In 2002, nearly 1 in the morning on the 22nd of September, there was a 4.8 magnitude earthquake, 9 kilometres below Dudley, between Birmingham and Wolverhampton. Apparently this happened because the Atlantic Ocean is getting wider, moving us further away from America. Seismologists described it as a light earthquake. Some chimneys fell down, but there were no casualties. How much the tremor is felt depends whether the land beneath you is hard or yielding. The Richter scale is logarithmic. So a magnitude 5 quake is 10 times bigger than a 4 and 100 times stronger than a 3. This is to keep things manageable when you want to account sensibly for both the most gentle and the most violent quakes on the same scale. A 7 earthquake hit Haiti in 2010, and Quincy Jones with 80 guest musicians re-recorded We Are the World, which was, until Princess Diana's death, the best-selling pop single of all time. The new version was released as part of the opening ceremony of the 2010 Winter Olympics. It was panned by critics. Gloria and Emilio Estefan recorded a Spanish-language version at the same time. I'm not sure what the Ethiopian is for Do They Know It's Christmas, but £8 million wasn't to be sniffed at back in 1984. I wouldn't sniff at it now, to be honest. I slept through the 2002 earthquake, the same way I sleep through thunderstorms and police sirens. It takes a lot to wake me. But when Luke arrived and then Sarah, their faintest cry or murmur from another room was enough to ping me out of bed. It's clear that the sleeping brain runs a filter, deciding which noises are important and should wake you and which can be ignored to leave your sleep undisturbed. Some animals practice unihemispheric sleep. They shut down half their brain to sleep while the other half monitors for threats. Ducks do it, and dolphins. They sleep with one eye open. So we're heading for Aleppo, the second city of Syria. There are maybe 2 million people there, and I'm looking for one of them, Abdel, in this photograph. How long would you have to walk the streets of a city to see all its citizens? How many different people do you see each day? In your hometown you see recognisable characters regularly. The buttoned-up man, running to work every day in his leather shoes. The man with high cheekbones, the huge sunglasses and a wispy black quiff. The bald man with the sweatbands around his head and his wrists. The seemingly homeless guy who has the aura of a professor who has hit upon hard times. The one-legged woman begging for coins at the traffic lights. It's difficult to gauge how many less noticeable people we see numerous times without recognising them. Maybe we don't see many different people if we have a pattern of behaviour and areas we frequent. We pass people whose patterns overlap with ours and not with those that don't. Mostly, most of us are in, not out. We're mostly not available to be seen, unlike the homeless who are always on the streets. If you see familiar people in unfamiliar places, your social protocols can be thrown into confusion. In a shop, the relationship between you as customer and cashier is clear. Service receiver, service provider. But if you meet on the street, how are you supposed to interact? I like to say hello. I mean, that's basic civility. But maybe this is an intrusion onto the other person. Now they're not being paid to be friendly to me. Maybe they don't want to cheerily say hello. Maybe their professional friendliness makes me think that we get on better than we actually do, that we're closer than we actually are. And maybe they have absolutely no idea who we are because they see hundreds of people every day, if business is good, and out of context you're just some weirdo smiling at them in a slightly sinister fashion. I was at a dance show with Izzy once. We were in the stalls of a grand old theatre near the front. I was sat right by the central aisle, and halfway through the show, a dancer came down the steps at the side of the stage, crossed to the centre aisle, and walked directly up to me. She took my hand and said something like, "Please come with me." We left the auditorium and entered the foyer. In the foyer she asked me some questions about myself, what I did, where I was from. It was sweet. She was glamorous. After a minute or two of these pleasantries, she said, "You can go back now." Apparently, as I returned to my seat, a song was playing. One day my man will come back to me. I was inadvertently playing the role of my man for the rest of the audience. Anyway, the point is that after the show we went for a drink in the bar, and the dancers came out to also have a drink, including the dancer I had met and had the conversation with. So I smiled at her. She looked right through me, rightly or wrongly. That hurt. I felt used. For years, there was a man in Borsall Heath who sat on a particular street corner smoking. To say that he sat is to understate what he did. He lounged, he reposed, he luxuriated on his chosen doorstep, and he smoked extravagantly, holding the butt at its very end with the very tips of his finger and thumb, while his other fingers splayed out like the crown on a peacock's head. The cigarette was always in his hand. I don't ever recall seeing it in his mouth. He had a fixed grin, papery brown skin with a matte finish, a desiccated nicotine brown. There every day, smiling, on the doorstep in the sunshine, or in the doorway in the rain. Occasionally he'd mix things up, catch you off guard by standing. The smoking man. He was an example of how to live a simple life for its each and every moment. We all recognised him, but none of us knew him. He was a fixture. You could use him as a landmark when giving directions, as if he were as a pub. Turn left after the smoking man. There's no sign he knew us. He was there until he wasn't, and when he wasn't, none of us knew where he'd gone. We presumed he'd died. Probably of a smoking-related disease, but none of us knew. Still his corner. If I had literary aspirations, I'd say he haunts the corner still, but he doesn't. It's just no times I pass that corner, I think of him. Maybe I should push for a brass plaque. While he was alive, I came to think of the smoking man as a seer or a prophet, a holy man who, rather than sit atop a mountain, has come closer to sea level. If we were only to consult him, he could share his wisdom. In truth, he was probably a lonely old man with some mental health challenges. Maybe ill-informed locals said the same thing about Isaiah, Jeremiah and Ezekiel. People are always predicting disaster, are often dismissed as Jeremiah's, but this is unfair on Jeremiah. He, like Cassandra, wasn't wrong, just ignored. Cassandra warned the Trojans that they should look their gift horse in the mouth, only to be dismissed. Looking in a horse's mouth means you can see their teeth, and in a horse's teeth they can tell you how old they are, how healthy they are. With this information you can estimate the horse's value. Now, whilst it's rude to investigate the value of a gift you have been given, if there is a chance that this gift is infected with malware, then it's important not to click on it. The Trojans should have listened to Cassandra, should have checked the teeth. I wonder what smoking man would have told us if we'd asked him, what words of wisdom he would have offered, what predictions he might have had. I'd have told him to quit smoking, but it's presumptuous to give a prophet health advice. Plus, cigarette packets have carried health warnings since 1971, so I'd not have been telling him anything he didn't already know. If I'd smoked, I'd probably have started on John Player specials, because their packs, all black with gold entwined initials, looked classy. It was a design carried through to great effect onto the Lotus Formula One cars that they sponsored. tobacco sponsoring Formula One worked well because the front and back wings set up a rectangular outline which allowed you to imagine there were just a bunch of cigarette packets racing around the track. In fact, as if to emphasise this, British Racing Motors launched their 1972 car by having it drive out of the inside of a giant packet of Marlboro. Also, smoking might affect your performance as a driver less than it would if you were a marathon runner. It wasn't always this way. The first commercial sponsors of motor racing were companies who supplied tyres, fuel, car parts, which of course made perfect sense. Then, in 1969, the Zimbabwean John Love broke new ground by getting sponsorship from Gunston, a local tobacco manufacturer. Up until this point, cars had always sported their national colours. French blue, Germans white, Italians red, of course, and the lovely British racing green. All this started to change when Lotus, following John Love's lead, struck a deal with Goldleaf and changed their livery to red and white. As governments woke up to the dangers of smoking, they banned direct cigarette advertising, and so money started flowing into sports sponsorship instead. Chitan sponsored Ligier, Mild 7 sponsored Benetton, Benson & Hedges sponsored Peugeot, Camel took over from JPS at Lotus, British American Tobacco sponsored Williams, West sponsored McLaren, after the glory days of James Hunt and Niki Lauda when they were sponsored by Marlboro. Knock knock. Who's there? Niki. Niki who? Lauda. Niki who? Niki Lauda. Those were the days. John Player also sponsored the One Day Cricket League, which I was into at the time. So they had my brand loyalty as a 9-year-old boy. Though later I think I was told that these were women's cigarettes, which probably put me off. Not that I remember there being any evidence behind this assertion. Mel Blanc claimed to have smoked a packet of cigarettes every day from the age of 9 until he was diagnosed with emphysema and then chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. His gravestone bears a message, "That's all, folks." At university, I would have smoked Marlboro, mostly because the whole Monument Valley Marlboro Man thing really worked on me. It's ironic that the brand that played so heavily on the Western cowboy iconography started with the tobacconist William Morris on Bond Street in London, not in the Grand Canyon. The name Marlboro dates from when the firm had a factory on Great Marlborough Street. That's now where the swanky department store Liberty now stands. The street was named after, but not owned by, the first Duke of Marlborough, with a more complicated spelling, who was a hero in the War of Spanish Succession and, I suppose, must count as the original Marlboro Man. Later, everyone I knew who smoked was smoking Camels from soft packs, so they had to tap them out, which was cool. Many years later, in the main government building in Skopje, where I was working, I found a whole wall of the staff common room lined with Camel cigarette packets. Floor to ceiling, corner to corner, and where you would conventionally expect to see pictures mounted on the wall, they had set 2 or 3 of the big multi-pack boxes that you can pick up at duty-free in the airport. I seem to remember there being a story about there being hidden images in the artwork on Camel packets. A human figure or face concealed in the leg or body of the camel. Messages from the Illuminati or the Masons. Or just a case of pareidolia where the brain tries to see familiar things in random patterns. Like a face in a cloud. close to a very high mountain peak. Let's drop down a bit. That's East Anatolian down there. Port city. It's got navy and commercial ships down there. There's a big oil tankers waiting to offload. Of course, you shouldn't smoke if you work in an oil refinery. Or on a tanker, I guess. Although maybe they've got special rooms set away from the main deck where people can smoke. It's a long time to give up if you are at sea with an oil tanker. Maybe that should be offered on the NHS. A 3-month tour of duty on an Esso tanker. Surefire way of giving up smoking. Well, surefire without the fire, hopefully. Also knew a group of people who started to roll their own, probably when cigarettes started to go up in price. Nowadays you'd probably call them artisan cigarettes. Some people had little machines for the rolling. This was cheating, and essentially re-industrialising what some people regarded as a craft. People who had given up smoking would sometimes ask to borrow the cigarettes of those yet to quit. If, as some people claim, smoking is primarily something to do with your hands, a carcinogenic fidget toy, then the roll-up was the way to go, with or without the tiny filters or the rolled up bits of cardboard torn from the Rizzler packet. On our first work trip to France, Nicky bought a pack of Gauloises in an attempt to blend in or ingratiate himself with our clients and co-workers. When offered, our French boss accepted one, ripped the filter off and lit it up. Nicky copied as if that was also his usual practice, and for a week he could only speak in a feeble rasp. How far is it to town? 2 miles, roughly speaking. Those are the days. A scene in one of Jean-Jacques Benex's super stylish 80s film starts with a close-up on a packet of Gitan. The shot spirals slowly out from there to reveal the whole set design is coordinated around that blue. Counterintuitively, the film isn't Betty Blue, but Diva. In France, Betty Blue was called 37.2 degrees le matin. 37.2 degrees is standard human body temperature. Mine is running significantly higher at the moment. What proportion of Birmingham's population do I know? Of the 1 million people, how many do I know? I suppose you have to know about knowing before you can answer that question. I don't think you have to know someone's name to know them. If you did, that number would be relatively low and fluctuate by the day as people's names come and go from my conscious recall. Even the names of people I've known for years, people whose names I knew yesterday and whose names I'll remember the moment they step outside the door, are often lost on me. They say names are stored in a special part of the brain. I think of it as a room with a filing system is terrible. You can describe a person in minute detail, you can recall trivia from their life story, you can recall activities you've shared, but their name, no chance. I was once better with phone name numbers, but I traded that ability for being better at names. Now I probably only know 3 phone numbers. One of those is 999. My chief technique for remembering a name is to try and remember the name. This sounds stupid, but too often when I'm told someone's name I'm not concentrating hard enough, so now hear it and repeat it back is my first step, especially if I'm iffy on the correct pronunciation. Alexander's cleaner back in Rhodes was Garda. When she was introduced, I asked her to repeat her name 2 more times and said it back to her to check I had it right. It's a bit embarrassing, but it shows your commitment, plus it's not as embarrassing as forgetting it later on. The next stage is to match this new person's name with the name of someone I already know who has the same name. So, I meet someone called Izzy. That's easy. I remember she's got the same name as Izzy. It's Izzy. This approach works fairly well, but does break down if you're introduced to someone like Garda, who is the first person you've met with that name. At this point you have to get inventive, so Garda sounds a bit like Prada. She's wearing a house coat, not Prada. So basically you invent a peg to hang the memory on. In this case, a clothes peg. They say the challenge in remembering someone's name is that there are a lot of different people to match with a lot of different names, and there is only one very specific correct answer, with no good ways of working logically towards what that answer might be. For some reason, letting the name recall section of my brain search for a name alone without my consciousness looming over it trying to help is an effective technique, but it is time consuming, so it's no use when the person is standing right in front of you. It's more helpful when you're in a bar trying to remember the name of someone who isn't there, and then, when the conversation has moved on to something else, you can chip in with Steve Buscemi. Relax. It's when you stop trying to remember that you find you can remember. For a long time after I moved to Birmingham, I couldn't recall the name of Mr. Northfield, who was my A-level physics teacher. Normally this wouldn't matter, but Mr. Northfield, as well as being my A-level physics teacher, was the memorable name that I gave to banks, etc., as the answer to a security question. Even though he was extremely intimidating, I loved Mr. Northfield. So it was upsetting as well as inconvenient not to be able to recall his name. Eventually I realised the problem. His name was being masked by an entire area of South Birmingham. My brain's name recall department was issuing up Northfield as the answer to who was your A-level physics teacher or what's your memorable name, only for another department of my brain acting in a supervisory role to say, no, don't be ridiculous, that's an area of South Birmingham, not a physics teacher or a memorable name. Brain, eh? Can't live with it. Can't live without it. I know the truth, but how can a mortal prove their innocence before God? He can't answer one of 1,000 of his questions. He is wise in heart and mighty in strength. Who hath hardened himself against him and prospered? He removes the mountains, and they don't know it. He overturneth them in his anger. He shaketh the earth out of her place, and the pillars thereof tremble. He commandeth the sun, and it riseth not. He blacks out the stars. He alone spreadeth out the heavens, and treadeth upon the waves of the sea. He made Arcturus, Orion, and the Pleiades, and the chambers of the south. He does great things that we cannot fathom, and wonders without number. He goeth by me, and I see him not. He passeth on also, but I perceive him not. If he taketh away, who can stop him? Who will say unto him, What are you doing? If God will not withdraw his anger, everyone cowers at his feet. How much less can I answer him and choose my words to reason with him? Even though I am innocent, I can't argue with him. All I can do is plead with my judge for mercy. If I called God and he had answered me, I do not believe that he would listen unto my voice. For he breaketh me with a tempest, and multiplieth my wounds without cause. He will not suffer me to take my breath, but filleth me with bitterness. If I speak of strength, lo, he is strong, and if of judgment, who can challenge him? If I justify myself, mine own mouth shall condemn me. If I say I am perfect, my mouth would pronounce me guilty. Though I am blameless, I have no concern for myself. I despise my life. It's all the same, therefore I say it. He destroyeth the perfect and the wicked. If the scourge suddenly slays, he will laugh at the troubles of the innocent. The earth is given into the hand of the wicked. He covereth the faces of the judges. If it's not God, who is it? Now my days pass swifter than a runner. They flee away, they see no good. They are passed away as the swift ships, as the eagle that hasteth to the prey. If I say, I will forget my complaint, I will change my expression and comfort myself, I remain afraid of all my sorrows. I know that thou wilt not hold me innocent. If I be wicked, why then labour I in vain? If I wash myself with snow water, and make my hands never so clean, yet shalt thou plunge me in the ditch, and mine own clothes shall abhor me. For he is not a man as I am, that I should answer him, and we should come together in judgment. Neither is there anyone who can mediate between us, that might lay his hand upon us both. Let him take his rod away from me, and let not his fear terrify me. Then would I speak, and not fear him. But it's not so with me. Never lose hope, my heart. Miracles dwell in the invisible. If the whole world turns against you, keep your eyes on the friend. Who are my friends now? is weirdly red around here. Terra Rossa. Must be to do with iron deposits in the soil and rock. Funny to think of soil going rusty. That's what must be happening. Also the fact that it doesn't rain much round here and the sun is beginning to set. You can imagine Hollywood making biblical epics in this landscape back in the heydays. Finding Abdel could be the name of a Disney film. In Birmingham, maybe I know 1,000 people, perhaps more, 2 out of a million, so 0.2%. Of course, if we define no in the biblical sense, then that figure drops dramatically. What chance have I got of finding Abdel in a city with twice that population where I know no one and I don't know the language? Considerably less than 2%. I need a strategy. Abdel, Paula's ex-husband, who his neighbour in Athens said was probably with his family in Aleppo. Paula said they divorced 3 years ago and that was when he moved to Athens. There was no mention of them having had children together, so his family in Aleppo is most likely to be his parents, maybe siblings, aunts and uncles. Searching under the family name may be possible when I'm there. So the writing on the back of this photo shows that Abdel and Paula both knew Nikki from back when they were together and happy. 3 years plus, although I suppose photographs can be deceptive and we won't always know what is going on in people's lives. This photograph could have been taken the day the divorce suit was filed, but it looks like it was in happy times. Paula's job is interior design. She was in fancy silks in Birmingham for days looking for fabrics for a client doing up a place in Tuscany. Nikki doesn't care about interior decor, and if he did, he wouldn't have the money to hire a professional, so the link between them and Nikki is probably via Abdel. When would their paths cross, though? Photo doesn't give away many clues. Could have been taken anywhere around the Mediterranean. Could have been Rhodes or Tuscany. Paula had that big job in Tuscany. Not working for Abdel. I mean, his Athens flat was modest. Paula's Italian, so they split. She moves to Bologna from Tuscany, say Pisa or Florence or somewhere on the coast where this photo might have been taken. Nicky's not great on holidays like me, not good at doing nothing. He visits people, saves money, gets the local angle, local flavours, builds relationships. So he visits someone he knows, Abdel and his wife Paula at their place, or maybe her client's place that she's doing up in Tuscany. Actually, I think he did go on holiday to Tuscany once, now I think about it. The same year that we did our American road trip. What's that now, 6 years ago? I mean, that timeline works. They divorce. Abdel was only in Italy because of Paula. He can't cope being there without her, so he moves to Athens, still in Europe, but closer to his family in Syria. Working in Europe with a Syrian passport isn't easy. Don't let just anyone do that. It's easier if you're someone with something valuable to bring to the table. Skill, like mine, like Nicky's. So it makes sense that they met through work. 6 years ago, maybe a little more. We were pretty inseparable at that time, did most jobs together, but I don't know Abdel, don't recognise him. I can't remember Nicky ever mentioning an Abdel. So maybe they went through work but not on a job, a conference. That'd work. Conference, 2, 3, 4 days together, long enough to establish a rapport. You share professional problems, you're interested in the same things, you bump into each other in the queue for thermos coffee dispensers, you eat buffet food together, If he drinks, you're in the bar together. If he smokes, you're huddled together where smokers huddle, the rebel subgroup sharing lighters. Yeah, conferences 6 years ago, give or take, that rings a bell. Something about emergency power connections, rapid response, solar solutions, working with NGOs, security and the future. We probably couldn't afford for both of us to go. We both said we weren't bothered one way or the other. We ended up flipping a coin. As soon as the coin decided I would go, we both realised that Nikki should go. It became the fabled coin of truth, reveals your hidden desires. So Nikki went to this conference in Cairo. He got to see the pyramids. When he got back, he was buzzing for a week or so. There were great people there. He said clever people, people taking real risks to help others. Did he mention someone from Syria? I can make myself believe that so long ago. Possible leave for some work, a ceasefire meant it was possible to go in and help. 2020, the dates work. So, Abdel is smart. His home's Aleppo, his things engineering, electronics, I don't know, physics. When I arrive, I'll get over to the university and ask around there. If he's the kind of person I'm starting to think he is, then he's got to have links there. He'll have worked there, or he'll have an industry contact of theirs, or he's a former postgrad. I'm excited about this. I think this is the thread that I have to pull. Besides, I haven't got much else to go on beyond walking the streets endlessly with a photograph. So, Aleppo is coming up. Is it okay to land at Aleppo airport? What am I going to find? I mean, maybe I should just put down in a field somewhere. I don't know. I mean, an airport has a runway, which I've found is usually good. There's fuel. There's shelter, but there's also officials and paperwork and questions. If the rings have drawn attention to me, if Abdel or Paula are more than just an ex-couple and the rings are more than just unwanted love tokens, then they, whoever they might be, would have no difficulty finding a red and chrome Cessna flown by an Englishman parked on the apron. But if I don't land there, where am I going to find? Fields have ditches, rocks, trees, power lines. Then farmers would be there within minutes, and children too. Aeroplanes don't slip quietly into the countryside without being seen, like the glider that landed in the field behind my house when I was a kid. Within moments it was surrounded by people some I'd never even met before. Then someone else would rock up. They'd ask questions I wouldn't understand and couldn't answer. Who was I? Why'd I landed? Where'd I come from? Someone would call the police and tell them that a middle-aged Englishman has appeared out of the sky with very little money and no convincing reason for being there. Airport it is. Keep it official-ish. Let's get down. Let's get started. Find Abdel. I think I might like him. I'm not sure what he'll think of me when I return the wedding rings, if that's what they are. But I'm hopeful. Abdel, I'm going to find you. Thank you for joining us again on our episode number 9 of Round the World, Konya to Aleppo. We will be back the same time next week, 7 o'clock British summer time. I think it is still summer then. And we will be flying from Aleppo to somewhere else, depending on whether Reggie finds Abdel or not. That's him, by the way, with his beautiful ex-wife, Paula. Both very good looking. Let's hope he finds him. Thanks for joining us. See you next week, I hope. Good night.